All right, guys. I just came from grocery shopping and I did most of my grocery shopping at Trader Joe's because I know that's where a lot of you shop. And then I picked up the final last things at Whole Foods and then the co-op. So let's talk a little bit about how I'm grocery shopping and how do I think about my running grocery list because I don't have to write it down anymore, but I did in the beginning. So when I think about a plant-based plate, I think about half of it being a non-starchy vegetable, a quarter of it being in intact whole grain or a starchy vegetable, and then a quarter of it being a plant protein source. And so I know that my ratio when I'm grocery shopping is going to be 2 vegetables to every like serving that I have of intact whole grain and bean. And then we'll talk about added fats and leafy greens later. So what I did is I went to the grocery store and I said, okay, what are these easy options? Like what could I do that has minimal to no prep to it? And one of my favorite things just to snack on are these sugar snap peas. Oh, I don't know that you can see them well. And the sugar snap peas, these are the ones from Trader Joe's. They're organic and they are half a pound. So I could snack on this just in between meals to get my veggie intake higher, or I could add like this to my lunch. So say I'm having like a PB&J sandwich. I want to go with like easy as possible today. Great. I add these and now I have a next best meal. I have a meal that I've essentially just added half a pound of veggies to. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Another really quick and easy one is I love snacking on bell peppers. And I will just take it and hold it by the stem here. Here, I'll show you. Um, I will just take it and I'll rinse them off and I'll hold it by the stem and I'll eat it kind of like an apple because that means that all the seeds stay in the center. And I know some people get fancy and they tear it out and they take all the seeds off and like you do you, totally fine. But quick and easy is the name of the game. And this like 3 red bell peppers is a full pound. So if I'm looking to hit my full pound of veggies for the day, could I have 3 peppers? Yeah, absolutely. I could also mix and match. I could have a pepper and a half, and I could have a bag of sugar snap peas. And so making it easy is really the key to being consistent. What else do I snack on that doesn't need to be cooked? I love, oh my gosh, if you've ever had frost sweetened carrots, when it frosts and the carrots are on the ground, they get sweeter. And so it's that time of year, it's fall right now in Maine, and they have the frost sweetened carrots. So I will buy a bag of these. And if I know that I'm going to be out for a long period of time and I know that I'm going to be tempted to stop somewhere, I will literally stock just a baggie of these. I'll like take them to go. And that way I have something to munch on that will get me through and often be able to help me drive past that, that place that I want to stop or that I would typically stop. It's a way to curb a habit by adding also non-starchy veggies. So you get points for it as well. Um, okay. And then other things. I almost always have some type of salad green on hand. And I tend to prep my own just because that's the way I like it. But there are really quick options. So don't feel like you have to be intimidated by this. So lacinato kale. This is my favorite. It's um it looks I guess it doesn't look dry on film, but it's a little bit dry in person. And then once you take it off the stem and you massage it, we'll talk about how to actually prepare it. But once you do that, it becomes so lovely. So I generally try to do kale, arugula, or cabbage because those are my high calcium leafy greens. And I know cabbage, we could argue, but I almost always have one of them in my house. And right now I'm finishing up my arugula, so then I'll transition to kale. But these are the thoughts that I have in my head when I'm going grocery shopping is, okay, what is my calcium rich green? And always having 1 or 2 of them in the house. And then in terms of just throwing some green leafies on a plate or throwing it under a meal, my husband likes the sweet greens. So I do that just because I know he'll eat it. And then Trader Joe's actually has pre-done kale. Now, is it more expensive? Yes. but doesn't mean that maybe it's like, it's not perfect, right? Like I'm not buying this and or buying all the ingredients and doing it myself. But if this means I get kale on my plate, then that's fabulous. It doesn't need to be perfect. And sometimes in the beginning, it's a little bit more expensive until we figure out how to prep our ingredients at home and how to do it in a way that we're not spending a lot of time doing it, because the time spent prepping matters so much. So anyway, this kale mix is really great and it doesn't have any dressing. So when you do the dressing, it's perfect because then you can add as much as you want to it. The pre-dressed ones are always something that I'm cautious of. And I buy shredded carrot. Why? Because it makes me happy and it makes my grain bowls just feel like they're on another level in terms of like how happy they make me. And so I will buy this. I do not spend time shredding my own carrots if I want shredded carrots. And yes, some people have time for that, but our goal here is how do I make it as quick and as easy as possible to get it on my plate? Okay. And then we're going to get to, okay, what do I steam? Well, I love, oh my God, these are from Whole Foods, but these are the hippie green beans. I will put this in my steamer and we'll talk about how to actually prep them on the stove in just a bit. But I will throw these in my steamer, and these are the easiest things to put on like what I call a next best plate. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. And then here's one where, so I got some Brussels sprouts here. And it's one of those, these are from Trader Joe's, and it's one of those things where it's really fantastic because it's about a pound. And here's one of the ones where I see a lot of people who are new to cooking veggies go wrong. So these are part of the mustard and green family. And if I roast these without oil, if I don't even put like a light coating on it, they will turn to mustard, like literally like mustard, like you would put on like, a hamburger or on fries, right? And so this is one of the ones that we'll talk a little bit more about cooking. And there are ways that you can cook them without oil where they don't get mustardy. Like I could parboil them and then bake them to get them crispy and have them not be mustardy, but that's one that we'll really talk about. And then there are some gray area veggies here. These are adorable. So I got they're honey nut squashes because I generally will get a butternut squash and I have one on my table over there. But I got some of these honey nut squash, and they're not quite a root vegetable, but they're also really not a non-starchy. And so we just count them as non-starchies based on the calorie density of them. But these are really fun. I will chop these up and we'll throw them in my air fryer later, and they are so yummy. When I think about next best meals that are really just comfort meals, so when I see somebody make like the mac and cheese or, the type of pasta, these go so well in pasta, like any type of pasta dish, and they make it feel just as rich. And so these are a great next best option when we're trying to make those next best plates. And again, we'll talk about that next best plate in a minute. Okay. So that's veggies. Now, these are my fresh veggies. I always have frozen veggies in my freezer, and I tend to pick one or two of them. So right now, I have broccoli florets, and this is the 2-pound bag. So this will last me 4 meals, and it's a lot of broccoli. Broccoli has a very low calorie density, and so you really do get a lot of bulk. And then the other thing I have right now is actually frozen butternut squash because come on, easy as possible. And what do I do with these? I will steam them. If I have time, I'll bake them, but baking takes like an hour, or they take 15 to 20 minutes in the air fryer. So I'm always thinking about what do I have that's something that feels fancy that I can really cook up and make nice. And a lot of the times I even bake those carrots, but also how do I get food on my plate fast when I need it? All right. And so that's my non-starchy veggies. And that's a little bit more than I would generally buy for one person, but it's me and my husband, and he eats similarly to me. And so I generally will overdo it a little bit on veggies, knowing that the goal would be to finish them. And so that's one part of the plate, right? So half my plate should be non-starchy veggies. We've gone through that. That was my shopping list when I go through the produce section, thinking about, okay, how much is a half a pound if I'm aiming for at least a pound a day, looking at, okay, if I'm shopping for 3 to 4 days, do I at least have 3 to 4 pounds for me to add to my meals? And then do I have some frozen options? So that way, if I ever run short on non-starchies, they're there in the house. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about on the plate are our intact whole grains or our starchy vegetables. All right, guys, my counter is getting really crowded. So the next thing that I generally do is I always keep intact whole grains in the house, and I have three different options almost always. I have a frozen option, I have a pre-made option, and then I have grains that I can actually boil, and I have a treat grain. So I guess I have four. But generally, I always keep at least three types of grain in the house. And so let's talk about what those are. So the quickest thinking option, it's last minute. I don't have any time. I just need to microwave something. Well, Whole Foods has frozen brown rice. Is it my favorite? Oops, sorry, here. Frozen brown rice. Is it my favorite? No, it's not my favorite. But will this do the job? Absolutely. And they're saying 1 cup per serving. About 3/4 of a cup would be equal to a serving, like an actual serving that I would make at home. And so this is always something that's in my freezer. All right. So that's my quick version. It's just a green that I have there. My other quick version is the 10-minute farro from Trader Joe's. So 10-minute farro, literally you just boil it 2 to 1, 2 cups of water to 1 cup of grain, and that would make me 4 servings because a 1/4 cup of grain is 1 serving, and that's something we'll talk a lot about through the program. But I always love this because typical farro takes 50 to 60 minutes to boil, and this only takes 10 minutes. And so it really is that quick. I've made it a lot now. And so I always keep this on hand. One of the people in our group program actually showed me this, and oh my gosh, I'm never going back. So those are my two quicker options. Now, say I don't have any time. Say that I'm not at home and I just need to grab something on the go. I'm traveling. I know that there's going to be a Whole Foods in the area because there almost always is in Maine. You're either between New York or Portland. So I guess upstate makes it a little bit hard. But I love their grain packets. Now, these grain packets, when I look at them, per pouch, this is 370, this is 390, 350, 360. So all of these are double portions. And it even says that on there, which is actually really nice. They give you I don't think you can see it, but they give you the nutrition information for either 1 serving or the whole pouch. But these are all double servings. Now, I'm not going to travel, eat 1 serving, and then hold on to the other one. And that's why I really love these because not all of them are, but a lot of them actually have um, some type of bean and intact whole grain in them. And that's why I typically pick these ones. So this one is again 360 per pouch. So they're really similar, but generally that part of my plate. So when I make a plate, I've got half my plate non-starchy vegetables and I've got half intact whole grain and plant protein source. So like a bean, tofu, tempeh. And when I'm looking at that, a typical serving of grain is anywhere from 150 to 180 calories. A typical serving of bean is going to be in that and they really do vary. You can get down to like 80 or 90 calories a serving and then all the way up towards 200 calories. And so when I think about an average, 350 for that side of my plate is very reasonable. And because these are salted and they already have oil added to them, I don't even need to, I don't actually even warm these up. I just bring a spoon or a fork with me and I can eat them there. So if I need an on-the-go meal, and I'm just like, how do I hit the things? I've got my healthy fat because there's already oil in this. I've got my intact whole grain. I've got my lentils. So I've got my plant protein source. And great, I've got half a pound of veg. So this is a really quick to-go meal, and I don't really need to think about it. This is something that I would just grab on my own. Okay. And I said that I typically have two other types of grain that I keep. And the other type of grain that I keep is just dry grain. So this right here is whole oat groat. And I got it from the co-op on the East End. They have a really good supply. But basically, it's, oh, you're not going to be able to see this. Basically, it's dry grain. And I can identify an intact whole grain because I have to boil it to eat it. And if I grind it, I turn it into flour, right? And so that is the difference there. So I have a couple different types of intact whole grains. We will talk about that. The one thing to be really careful of is when I think about wild rice. Now, this is a blend, but when I'm going grocery shopping, brown rice, pearled barley, farro, all of these things are whole oat groats. Those are all cheap options. That's a serving that's less than $1 in terms of like when I'm actually making it, and actually a lot less than $1. But when I think about wild rice or these wild rice blends, they are usually twice as expensive. And if I'm just getting wild rice, it's almost like 4 times as expensive. So I don't eat a lot of wild rice just because of the cost of it. The other thing that you want to think about is I really like Lundberg because I know that they're low arsenic rice and I eat a lot of rice. And so that's something, if you're part of the program, we can talk about a little bit more, but we do want to be a little bit judicious if we're basing our diet on an intact whole grain. And again, brown rice, like I do a lot of it. I love the nutrient profile of brown rice, and there's a reason why whole cultures base their dietary pattern on brown rice. And so I'm a little bit more cautious about the rices that I choose. Okay, so that's it for grain here, but I always like to keep a dessert grain. And one of them that you can find at the co-op are these mochi squares. And when I think about this, it puts the portion size really in perspective of flour versus intact boiled whole grain. And I say that because you see how small these squares are? I have one open. Give me just a second. All right. Do you see how small these squares are? This square is like not quite even my palm. Okay. It's small. This is a serving of grain. And so I keep this for nights where I really want something sweet, and I will puff these on the stove and we can talk about how to cook them. But these are the ultimate like travel food. If I was going camping with family or friends and they were like, what are you going to roast over the fire? I would put this in my cast iron and I would puff it up, and it's so tasty, but it's really calorie dense because when I boil grain, this is a dry grain that's been milled. When I boil grain, I add water, and most boiled grain doubles. And so I'm going to get double the size in a boiled grain, which really matters for hunger and um, feeling really full in between meals versus something that is dry like this. But again, this is kind of like my dessert grain if I'm looking for something. Okay, so we've talked about half a plate of non-starchy veggies. We've talked about my intact whole grain portion, options that are really quick, things that take a bit longer to prep. And then now we're going to talk about plant protein sources. All right, so we already have some plant protein sources if we've been doing the any of these to-go mixes, like the barley and lentil. These are the easy option. This is something in my cabinet where I haven't done any prep. Great, just toss it in there. I've got it, right? Like I can toss it on top of salad. I can have it with whatever non-starchy veggie I want. I can add a dressing. Like those are so quick. But what do I want to have that is another easy option when it comes to beans? Now, I love these Trader Joe's soups. Ooh, I'm sure that there's another one around here somewhere. One second. Oh, well. So one of the things that I really love when it comes to getting in plant protein sources are soups. And I really don't love canned soup because the amount of salt in it, like I just don't cook with a lot of salt, so it doesn't make me feel good afterwards. But I really do enjoy the Trader Joe's. I like the lentil soup. And then now they have this harvest chili, which is really fun. But this has black beans and butternut squash. So I already have my non-starchy vegetable. I've got my plant protein source. And so I'm missing my intact whole grain. And they have a little bit of quinoa in here, so it says. I'd be curious. I don't know that there'd be a full serving in here because this whole thing is 320 calories. But this is a lot of volume for 300 calories. And then could I add some more veggies to it? Or could I put this over intact whole grain and have a really great weight loss or health promoting meal? Yeah, absolutely. And so this is something that I almost always have one of these soups in my fridge. So that way, if I haven't prepped anything, great, I have something that I can pick up, I can microwave, I can put in a pot, but it needs to be quick if we're going to do it. And we have to actually have things that we enjoy. Okay. So say I have a little bit more time. Oh, and there's the lentil soup I couldn't find. But the Trader Joe's lentil soup is also really great. Say I have a little bit more time. I love tofu, and I could eat tofu just out of the box. And in fact, a lot of the times we'll sprinkle it on salads and it looks like feta. And I know it's not the same. Like it's never going to be the same. But I will use it like mozzarella or feta without cooking it, or I tend to chunk it into cubes and throw it in my air fryer. But I don't need to put anything on tofu because I've been eating it long enough that I just really enjoy the flavor of it. And that's something that people come to learn throughout the program. Like everybody who's new to tofu, and not everybody, most people who are new to tofu, they come in and they're like, Jess, can't do it, don't know how to make it taste good. And so that's where these pre-marinated tofu packets come in. So this is the teriyaki flavor from Whole Foods. And they are more expensive if you're buying them pre-marinated, but this is a really great way to learn to love tofu. It's just by trying out these different marinated packages. Now, this right here, I could literally just toss on a baking sheet and heat up in the oven, usually like 350, 400 for 30, 40 minutes. Or I can throw this in my air fryer for like 15 to 20 minutes, and it is going to be crispy and so yummy. And so this is another option. And then when it comes to beans, beans are one of the best weight loss foods. They're so filling, they have so much fiber. And so they're such an awesome thing to include if we can. And they're also really good at helping us lower cholesterol because of the amount of fiber in them. And I like to boil my own beans because I love the texture of them, but I don't always have time. And so I will pick up BPA free. That's really important. The BPA free lined cans, or they have boxes at Whole Foods. And I will use half a can per meal. And that's just a good rule of thumb. And this right here, it says that there's about 350 calories in this whole thing, which is it's about 2 servings. They're telling me that it's only 100 calories per serving, but I know better with beans and how many calories I'm generally eating when I make them on my own. And so generally half a can of beans is a good call um, if you're doing like pre-bought beans. Okay. And then of course I always have some fruit. And people always ask me, Jess, what do you snack on? Well, I'm going to snack on like some of my non-starchy vegetables because I feel like it's a great way to get closer to my goal, to make healthy choices in between meals if I'm hungry. If I can get non-starchy vegetables in, that is ideal. But fruit is also great. And I almost always am putting fruit on top of oatmeal or just having fruit as my to-go snack. So if I go out and I buy blackberries or raspberries, typically these are around 100 calories per container. And so they're really good low calorie snacks that I really enjoy, but are these more expensive than other things? Yeah, absolutely. Same comes with like blueberries. I almost always have berries that I'm buying, and berries are just their calories are so low and they're so high in fiber, and they're such a healthy food option that I always have berries. In fact, when I met my husband, I used to buy so many raspberries. This is so bad, but I loved them so much that I used to buy like a pack every time I went to the grocery store, and I'd come up with any reason to go in and get them. I love raspberries. Um, but what are the other things that I like to keep on me? I, as a snack late on at night, so say we're sitting down and watching something, um, I love frozen grapes, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, especially in the winter because it gets cold. But if I freeze grapes, they're such a fun snack because they have the crunch to them, they're sweet. It just feels like such a nice treat. So I always try to freeze some grapes. And then right now in Maine, I'm like, I don't want to show you guys this, but these are my favorite grapes. So I don't know what about them. They're muscadine grapes. They're only available this time of year. And I can't get enough of them. And so I bought 2 packs, but they are only in the grocer for like less than a month. And so this is what I'm doing right now. But my produce tends to change based on what's fresh this time of year. And so we're going into apple season. Apples will be next on my list, and pears. And I think that it's really fun to try to eat seasonally because it makes a big difference in how much taste and flavor these things have. Okay, so we've covered um, non-starchy veggies. We've covered intact whole grains. We've covered plant protein sources. And then when it comes to added fats, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the cooking. And then I have a whole recipe box of sauces that people really love. I love the sumac one, the tahini one. I use a lot of them myself. And sometimes I do really lazy sauces where I'll just use measured amount of oil, like walnut oil on there because it's got such a nice toasted flavor. All right. So let me put some of these away and let's chat about this a little bit more in terms of how do I think about prep.